The year is 1878. Somewhere in the New Mexico Territory, a man named Thomas Blackjack Ketchum is riding fast through the desert with $3,000 on his head. You have a badge, a revolver, and a horse that hasn't slept in 2 days. You also have no backup, no radio, no GPS, and no guarantee that anyone will come looking for you if you disappear. This is the job. And before this video is over, you're going to understand exactly why most men who tried it ended up broke, shot, or both. In 1872, the United States Supreme Court ruled in a case called Taylor v. Tainter that bail bondsmen and the agents they hired had extraordinary authority to pursue and capture fugitives. The court granted private citizens the power to cross state lines, enter homes without warrants, and physically detain individuals who had skipped bail. No law enforcement badge required. The system existed because frontier law enforcement was genuinely overwhelmed. In 1880, the entire state of Texas had fewer than 2,000 lawmen to cover nearly 270,000 square miles of territory. Sheriffs in rural counties were often unpaid or minimally compensated. Private bounty hunters filled a vacuum that the government simply couldn't close. But here's what nobody told you when you signed up. A wanted poster offering $500 sounds like serious money in 1878. The average American worker earned roughly $300 per year at that time. But that poster didn't tell you what it would cost to collect it. Your horse needed feeding, shoeing, and veterinary care. A single horseshoe replacement cost between 50 cents and $1. If your animal went lame in the middle of the Arizona desert, you weren't just losing money, you were potentially losing your life. Experienced hunters budgeted heavily for horse expenses, and a serious pursuit could involve 2 or 3 horses rotated to maintain speed and endurance. Then there was ammunition. A Colt single-action Army revolver fired .45 caliber cartridges that cost around $1 per 50 rounds. You needed to be accurate enough under pressure to wound rather than kill, because a live fugitive was worth the full bounty, while a dead one might get you a fraction of that or nothing at all, depending on the poster's specific language. Food, lodging, informant payments, telegraph communications, bribes, all of it came out of your pocket before you ever saw a cent of that reward. Most bounty hunters operated at a loss for months before capturing anyone. Finding a fugitive in the 1870s required skills that take years to develop, and most of it had nothing to do with courage. Experienced hunters cultivated what they called the network, a web of bartenders, livery stable operators, prostitutes, general store owners, and Native American scouts who exchanged information for money or favors. This was your intelligence system. There was no other one. Reading trail sign, disturbed earth, bent grass, fire ash temperature, water source patterns was a science learned over years. Men who grew up in cities, seduced by the idea of frontier adventure, arrived with no tracking ability whatsoever and discovered their target could be 50 miles in any direction with no clue which way to ride. The Apache and Comanche scouts hired by experienced hunters were often the true professionals of the operation. Men like Al Sieber, chief of scouts for General Crook in Arizona, commanded respect precisely because indigenous knowledge of the terrain was irreplaceable. Without it, a hunter chasing a man through the Sonoran Desert was essentially guessing. Walking into a town where your fugitive might be hiding meant immediate political complications. Local sheriffs did not always welcome bounty hunters. Some resented the competition. Some were corrupt and protected wanted men in exchange for a cut of their criminal earnings. In Tombstone, Arizona, visiting bounty hunters were required to check their weapons at the marshal's office. Failure to comply could mean arrest, or worse, a quiet conversation with men who had financial interest in your target remaining free. You had to read a room instantly, decide who was safe to talk to, Judge whether the bartender's friendliness was genuine or whether he was already sending a message to the man you were hunting. And if you found your target in a saloon surrounded by 4 friends who all had hands near their guns, there was no procedure manual for that situation. You improvised, negotiated, or retreated and tried again tomorrow. Paranoia wasn't a weakness in this profession. It was a professional requirement. If you're finding this fascinating, drop a like on this video right now and subscribe if you haven't already, because what comes next is the part that history books consistently leave out. The Colt revolver, despite its legendary status, was not a reliable fight ender at distance. Effective combat range for a trained shooter was roughly 20 to 30 yards. Beyond that, you were hoping. And most gunfights in the real West happened at close quarters, inside buildings, on narrow streets, in low light conditions. The famous gunfight at the OK Corral in 1881 lasted approximately 30 seconds. 3 men died. The participants were close enough to smell each other. Wounds from .45 caliber bullets caused catastrophic soft tissue damage. And without antibiotics, infection was as lethal as the bullet itself. A man shot in the shoulder on Monday could be dead from sepsis by Saturday. Many hunters carried field surgery supplies, whiskey for cleaning wounds, suture needles, bandaging. Some became skilled at basic wound treatment out of pure necessity. Not every fugitive was equally dangerous, and experienced hunters developed a clear sense of which targets were worth pursuing alone. Bank robbers and stagecoach raiders operated in gangs, which fundamentally changed the calculation. You weren't hunting one man. You were hunting one man surrounded by people who would kill you without hesitation. The James Younger gang was essentially untouchable by individual hunters. Jesse James had a support network of sympathizers across Missouri and Kansas who provided shelter, information, and warning systems. The Pinkerton Detective Agency attempted multiple operations against the gang and suffered serious failures, including a 1875 raid on the James family farm that killed Jesse's young half-brother and injured his mother. The public backlash was severe. In regions where a fugitive was seen as a folk hero, and many were, in communities that resented banks, railroads, and Eastern money, the hunter could become the villain instantly. Bounty hunting also required sustained high-level threat awareness for days or weeks at a time. You slept lightly or not at all. You ate irregularly. You were constantly calculating risk, reading people, managing uncertainty. Historians studying frontier law enforcement note patterns of heavy alcohol use and what we would today recognize as symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder among men who spent extended periods in these conditions. Bass Reeves, one of the most successful lawmen and bounty agents of the era, a black man who served as a deputy U.S. Marshal in Indian Territory and captured over 3,000 fugitives in his career, was known for a preternatural calm that contemporaries found almost unsettling. That kind of composure doesn't come naturally. It's built over years of extreme experience, and the cost of building it is invisible in the historical record. Most men who entered the profession left it within 2 years, not because they found something better, because they couldn't sustain the psychological intensity. What did it actually take to survive? Not thrive, just survive. Genuine humility about your own limitations. The hunters who lasted were not the most aggressive or the most fearless. They were the most patient. They understood when to wait, when to withdraw, when a target wasn't worth the risk at current odds. A realistic financial model, pursuing multiple fugitives simultaneously when possible, and treating the whole thing like a business rather than an adventure. Physical conditioning that most people today would find extraordinary. Riding 40 to 50 miles a day for days consecutively, in temperatures ranging from desert heat exceeding 110 degrees to mountain cold well below freezing, without modern nutrition, clothing technology, or medical support. And perhaps most importantly, the ability to read people accurately and quickly. More confrontations were resolved through negotiation and psychology than through gunfire. The hunter who could talk a man into surrendering without violence lived significantly longer than the one who relied on his draw speed. By the 1890s, the golden era of the frontier bounty hunter was effectively over. The expansion of the railroad network made fugitive movement trackable. Telegraph lines connected law enforcement across vast distances. The professionalization of police forces in growing cities reduced the need for private recovery agents. The frontier itself was closing. Frederick Jackson Turner delivered his famous frontier thesis to the American Historical Association in 1893, arguing that the open frontier had fundamentally shaped American character and that it was now gone. The men who had made their living in that space had to become something else or disappear. What's remarkable is that the legal framework from Taylor v. Tainter still exists today. Bounty hunting is still legal in most American states. The profession didn't vanish. It evolved, adapted, modernized. But the world that shaped it, that made it brutal and uncertain and strangely compelling, is gone. And based on everything we just walked through, the expenses, the tracking, the politics, the violence, the psychological weight, the physical punishment, the question in the title holds up. You probably wouldn't survive a week. Most people didn't. Now I want to hear from you. If you could go back and observe one single moment from the Wild West era, not participate, just watch, what would it be? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and the answers people leave on videos like this are genuinely some of the best conversations on this channel. If this video gave you something real, the like button is right there. And subscribing means you won't miss what's coming next.